The breath of darkness has never been this thick. There are chapters in human history that we want to forget, but they still exist like a scar that never heals. Welcome to the dossier of a haunting dark history, a secret corner that modern medicine still mentions with ultimate loathing. In this special documentary episode, we will flip open the darkest pages of the dossier about a name that has become the definition of the devil, Josef Mengele. Imagine you are standing in the thick fog of the Auschwitz concentration camp on a winter night in 1943. Searchlights sweep across haggard faces, the soulless eyes of thousands of people who have just stepped down from cattle cars. Amidst the chaos of screaming and the smell of acrid smoke, a tall figure appears. He does not shout, he does not use crude violence. He stands there, dapper in a meticulously tailored SS uniform, spotless white gloves, and a haughty smirk on his lips. Why, after nearly a century, does the name Josef Mengele still make the whole world shudder whenever it is mentioned? Why is a doctor someone who was supposed to hold the mission of saving people recorded by history as the angel of death? He was not just a doctor of the Nazi army, he was a real nightmare in flesh and blood. He was the one who turned the operating table into a guillotine and turned science into an evil religion. In these first 30 seconds, I want you to prepare your mind. Because we are not just talking about dry historical facts. We are entering a dramatic criminal psychological journey, where the boundary between genius and devil is blurred. This is the story of how a brilliant intellect was poisoned by extreme Aryan ideology, and how he used his white-gloved hands to wave and decide the life and death of millions of people. Don't take your eyes off the screen, because what you are about to hear about Josef Mengele and the secrets at Auschwitz will completely change the way you perceive the limits of cruelty. To understand the cruelty of a monster, we must look at where it was born. Josef Mengele was not a product of poverty or lack of education. On the contrary, he was the golden child of the German upper class. Born in Günzburg, Bavaria, into a family that owned a powerful agricultural machinery manufacturing empire, Mengele grew up in luxury and extreme expectation. He was a true intellectual, a man possessing a sharp brain with 2 prestigious PhD degrees, one in anthropology from the University of Munich and one in medicine from the University of Frankfurt. But it was in those majestic university lecture halls that the seeds of the devil began to sprout. Under the guidance of professors following extreme eugenics, Mengele began to be obsessed with a crazy idea, the purity of Aryan blood. To him, medicine was no longer a tool to save people, but a weapon to purify the race. He viewed the world through human skull charts, eye color palettes, and dry anthropometric measurements. In the mind of this corrupted intellectual, the concept of human was erased, replaced by the term biological material. When putting on the ash-gray SS uniform, Mengele was not just wearing a soldier's suit, he was putting on an evil faith. His corruption reached its peak when he set foot in Auschwitz. Imagine a man who always appeared with an incredibly dapper look in a place where death and filth reigned. Why did he always wear spotless white gloves? Why were his boots always as shiny as if they had just been polished, even when he was walking on the ashes of the crematoriums? It was not merely cleanliness, it was ultimate contempt. Those white gloves were the barrier between the superior species that he was and the people he considered the dregs of humanity. He stood on the selection platform, holding a small leather crop in his hand, lightly tapping to the rhythm of a classical piece of music playing in his head. With a gentle smile always on his lips, a smile that witnesses later described as freezing the spine, he lightly waved his hand. Left, right. Life, death. The most loathsome thing about Mengele was not anger, but absolute calmness. He could tenderly give candy to a twin child while ordering their parents into the gas chamber without blinking an eye. To him, each prisoner had no name, no emotion, only a number tattooed on the arm, a soulless laboratory specimen in the giant lab named Auschwitz. His noir elegance was the strongest evidence for the fact that, when knowledge is separated from morality, humans can become a sophisticated and cruel devil, more so than any wild beast in nature. Welcome to the end of hell. When the cattle cars stopped at the Birkenau station, the heavy wooden doors opened, releasing a foul air and panicked screams. Amidst that chaos, a figure still maintained a terrifyingly calm demeanor. That was Mengele. The selection process began. Under high-power searchlights sweeping through the night, Mengele stood there like a judging god. He did not need guns, did not need whips. With just a gentle wave of the hand, or a careless nod, the fate of thousands of people was decided in less than a second. To the left was immediate death in gas chambers disguised as showers. To the right was life prolonged in the exile and pain of forced labor. He did it with a terrifying indifference, sometimes even lightly whistling to a Wagner march. To Mengele, this platform was not a place of separation, but a supermarket of living laboratory specimens. He scanned the haggard crowd, looking for special merchandise for his crazy collection. Leaving the deadly platform, we enter the center of the nightmare, Laboratory Block 10. If Auschwitz was hell, then Block 10 was its deepest level. Imagine a suffocating space, where the smell of phenol, bleach, and dried blood blended into a pungent mixture that was nauseating. Dim light from incandescent bulbs cast onto the rows of cold stone operating tables. Here, fear was no longer an emotion, it was an entity present in every breath of the prisoners. They did not fear death, they feared what Mengele would do to their bodies before they were allowed to die. Mengele had a morbid obsession with what he called deviations of nature. His most special interest was twins, Mengele's twins. He believed that decoding the secret of twins would help rapidly clone the superior Aryan race. He called those poor children my little white mice. He could give them chocolate, stroke their hair affectionately in the morning, only for him to personally perform horrific surgeries without anesthesia in the afternoon. He sewed the bodies of two children together to create artificial Siamese twins, or injected strange chemicals directly into their hearts to compare the speed of death between two bodies with the same genetic code. But his madness did not stop there. Mengele was also fascinated by dwarfs, people with congenital deformities, and especially people with different eye colors, heterochromia. He craved to find a way to turn dark eyes into the ocean blue eyes of the pure German. Experiments dyeing eyeballs with chemicals left hundreds of victims living in permanent darkness before being sent to the crematorium. The detached eyes were later nailed to his office wall by him like a collection of dried butterflies, a testament to the ultimate perversion of a man carrying the title of doctor. In the noir darkness of Auschwitz, Josef Mengele built an empire of pain, where every cry for help was swallowed by the silence of the stone walls. He did not seek knowledge to save people, he sought power to destroy and remold humanity according to his morbid will. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the darkest secret of the angel in white, the one who turned science into a dark art and turned Auschwitz into a laboratory with no escape for humanity. If there is a place where God's light never reaches, it is the operating tables in Josef Mengele's laboratory. We are entering the darkest part of this dossier, where science was no longer a guiding torch but became the blade of an educated murderer. Mengele did not just want to destroy the enemies of the empire, he wanted to restructure humans according to his morbid will. Let's start with the obsession with color, one of the most meaningless and brutal experiments, the effort to change eye color. To Mengele, sky blue eyes were the ultimate symbol of the Aryan race. He did not accept the brown, black, or gray eyes of Jewish and Romani prisoners. He performed a series of experiments injecting chemical dyes directly into the eyeballs of the victims, mostly children. Imagine the heartbreaking pain when corrosive chemicals began to soak into the most sensitive tissues of the body. The poor children not only had to endure ultimate pain but also faced severe inflammation, leading to permanent blindness. The eyes were later detached, nailed to the lab wall like collection specimens. He observed the necrosis of the eyeballs with a medical coldness, meticulously recording each stage of the victim's loss of vision without a hint of remorse. But the peak of madness was the experiment on twins, those he called Mengele's children. He was obsessed with creating conjoined individuals to prove theories of genetics. On a horrific night at Auschwitz, Mengele ordered two Romani twin children to be sewn together, back to back, connecting their blood vessels and internal organs brutally. He wanted to see if they could survive and share a circulatory system. The result was a nightmare lasting many days and nights. The two poor children died of infection and necrosis amidst screams of pain without any painkillers. Their parents, who were forced to witness that scene, went insane before being sent to the gas chamber. Not stopping there, Mengele turned living human bodies into tools to test the maximum endurance limit. In freezing ice water tanks, he forced prisoners to stand for hours to observe the process of hypothermia. He recorded exactly the moment the heart stopped beating, the moment the fingertips began to fall off due to freezing. He put victims into pressure chambers, withdrawing all oxygen to simulate conditions at extreme altitudes, watching their brains explode under the horrific pressure. Every new type of chemical, every type of plague bacteria or malaria was injected by him into the bodies of healthy people to study the destructive process of the disease. To Mengele, every groan was data, every death was a successful experimental result. Amidst that vast darkness, the voices of the survivors are the only light left to denounce these crimes. Eva Moseskor, one of Mengele's children who luckily survived, recounted in her memoir the moment she faced death. She remembered the image of Mengele walking into the room with a polished smile, holding syringes filled with strange chemicals in his hand. I had seen the corpses of other twins being carried out every day. I promised myself that I had to live, because if I died, the truth about what he did would be buried forever. Eva told of how she was injected with a substance that caused her body to swell and her fever to rise so high she became delirious, but it was her fierce will to live that helped her overcome the brutality of the man in white gloves. Mengele never considered himself a criminal. In his later diary entries, he still believed he was contributing to the progress of human medicine. But history has identified him as the one who betrayed the Hippocratic Oath in the worst way. His experiments left nothing for science but piles of remains and hereditary pain. Each name, each fate tormented by him at Auschwitz is a stark reminder that, when knowledge is separated from the heart, it is no longer science, it is a tool of the devil. When the last swastika flags were torn apart under the heels of the Red Army and the Allies, darkness covered the Third Reich. Amidst the ruins of a mad dream, Josef Mengele understood that the hour of judgment had come. But the man who had personally decided death for millions of people was the one who feared death the most. He did not choose suicide like Hitler or Himmler. With the instinct of a predator driven into a corner, Mengele began a plan to erase all traces. His first action was a cold calculation. He refused to tattoo his SS blood group under his left armpit, a mandatory regulation for every officer. It was this violation that became the ticket helping him escape identification by Allied prisoner of war camps after the war. He disguised himself as an ordinary infantry soldier, hiding among tens of thousands of prisoners of war, quietly waiting for the opportunity to disappear into the fog of history. The Great Escape began. Thanks to the help of a secret network named Odessa, an organization established to help Nazi war criminals flee, Mengele obtained forged documents under the name Helmut Gregor. He crossed the Alps toward Italy, where underground forces and even the inadvertent assistance of a few religious organizations helped him board a ship bound for South America. Argentina, Paraguay, and later Brazil became safe havens for the monster of Auschwitz. In Buenos Aires, Mengele did not live in the shadows at all. He was even confident enough to use his real name in some business papers, believing that the network of former Nazis in South America was strong enough to protect him forever. But he was wrong. Ghosts from the past began to catch up with him when Israel's legendary intelligence agency Mossad got involved. Mossad's hunt for Mengele was one of the most dramatic chapters in the world's intelligence history. Why could an agency kidnap Adolf Eichmann right in the heart of Argentina but lose track of Mengele so many times? The answer lies in his extreme ruthlessness and caution. There were times when Mossad agents were only a few meters away from him. In 1960, right after capturing Eichmann, Mossad had obtained Mengele's exact address at a farm in the suburbs. However, Orders from Jerusalem prioritizing bringing Eichmann back to Israel safely forced them to postpone the attack. When they returned, the house was nothing but a pile of ashes and footprints disappearing into the deep forest. The drama reached its peak when Mengele fled to Brazil. He lived in extreme paranoia, surrounded by loyal bodyguards and barbed wire fences. He changed residences constantly, slept with a pistol under his pillow, and always had poison ready in his jacket pocket. He saw enemies in every shadow, heard the footsteps of Mossad in every breeze blowing through the tropical jungle leaves. Mengele was not just fleeing Israeli agents, he was fleeing from the punishment of his own conscience, something he always claimed he didn't have. 30 years in hiding were 30 years he lived like a ghost, a stateless exile, pursued by the whole world but covered by the ghosts of the old regime. This hunt was not just an intelligence mission, it was a relentless war between justice and the cowardly evasion of a man who once considered himself God at Auschwitz. Justice is often imagined in the form of a brightly lit courtroom, a stark sentence, or a gallows where the perpetrator must pay for his crimes in front of humanity. But for Josef Mengele, history wrote a tragic and bitter ending. The man who had injected poison into the hearts of thousands of children, the man who had watched millions of people turn to ash in the crematoriums, ended his life not in chains, but in an accidental mishap at a pristine beach in Brazil. On February 7, 1979, at Bertioga Beach, a middle-aged man under the alias Wolfgang Gerhard went into the water to swim. Amidst the blue waves of the Atlantic Ocean, a sudden stroke struck down the man who once considered himself God at Auschwitz. He drowned. There were no cheers from a crowd, no judgment from a court, only the silence of the sea swallowing the last breath of one of the most hunted war criminals in the world. He was buried quietly under a false name, carrying all the dark secrets to an anonymous grave for many years. It took more than a decade later for the ghost of the angel in white to truly be brought to light. In 1985, investigators followed the trail and exhumed the remains at the Embu Cemetery. However, suspicion still loomed: was this really Mengele, or was it another escape play by the old fox? By 1992, thanks to the breakthrough progress of science, the very tool he once abused to massacre humans, justice, finally spoke. Cross-DNA testing with his son's blood sample confirmed with absolute precision, the skeleton lying under the name Wolfgang Gerhard was indeed Josef Mengele. The great fugitive was finally captured by his own genetic code. Looking back at Mengele's life, we see not just a criminal dossier, but a costly and bloody lesson of history. He is the most horrific testament to the fact that, when science loses morality, when knowledge is separated from humanity, humans can turn into devils faster and more sophisticatedly than any supernatural force. Mengele was not a mindless madman, he was an erudite intellectual who used logic to justify cruelty, used degrees to legitimize massacres. The dark legacy he left behind is not only the hereditary pain of the survivors but an eternal warning to humanity. Science without conscience is only destruction. The story of Josef Mengele will forever be a noir scar in the world's memory, to remind us that, the light of knowledge only has meaning when it is lit from the fire of compassion. The messenger of death has fallen, but the dossier on him must still be opened, so that never again, and no one, allows the hell of Auschwitz to repeat once more. The dossier on Josef Mengele closes here, but its tremors still echo to this day. We have just gone through a haunting dark history journey, where the boundary between a medical genius and a cold-blooded monster was completely erased. The story of the messenger of death is not just a dark chapter in World War II, it is a mirror reflecting ultimate brutality when humans abandon morality in the name of science and extreme ideals. Mengele's accidental death on the coast of Brazil is perhaps an irony of fate. He did not have to face a public trial, did not have to pay on the gallows before the eyes of surviving victims. Is that the final injustice that history holds for those who fell at Auschwitz? Or was it the loneliness, paranoia, and having to live like a ghost for 30 years in hiding that was a terrifying punishment for him? I want to hear your thoughts. How do you feel about the end of Josef Mengele? Was death in the shadows enough to wash away the crimes beyond the limits of humanity that he caused? Please leave your opinions in the comments below so we can discuss justice and lessons for humanity. If you find this content valuable, don't forget to press like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next historical noir dossiers. We will together flip open hidden secrets and face the rawest truths of history. Thank you for accompanying me in this documentary.